cheating ex of 7 years that slept with my friends, and the journey to recovery. Story 1. It was my first relationship, and I was the first woman she'd ever dated. We met when we were 18. Throughout the relationship we always had issues with her flirting with men, and I would have to confront her to ask her to stop because it made me uncomfortable. But I trusted her entirely. Every once in a while she would ask to open the relationship, and because I was insecure about not being enough for her I would agree and let her sleep with men. This would go on for a few weeks every year, until 4 years in, when I was traveling to visit my family and she asked to open the relationship while I was gone. I agreed and asked if I could sleep with a friend that had previously shown interest, but she said no. She slept with one guy regularly while I was traveling and it hurt. Eventually I asked her to close the relationship and stop sleeping with him. She said, "Don't you want me to be happy?" and didn't stop. I warned her that this felt like cheating and we could break up over this. She preferred to keep sleeping with him rather than be with me. Throughout the relationship I knew I hadn't been perfect. My mental health went unchecked, and I had a bad habit of skipping class and sleeping in. I never yelled or hit her or anything of that nature, though I was pretty clingy and my anxiety and PTSD made me needy. But I did support her emotionally and care for her needs. And I've always been good at growing and apologizing if I made her angry. We were best friends and in a romantic I was always flirting and being open about how I loved her. I took our first breakup really poorly. I mentally broke down and had to stay with friends, start seeing a therapist again, poured myself into work. To be honest, I wasn't very kind to her during that time. She still wanted to be friends and I would take every opportunity to argue with her the morality of her actions. She would always shut down and yell at me while continuing to date the guy she cheated on me with. Eventually that relationship imploded. She got too serious about him too quickly. He was angry that she would flirt with his friends. It got physically abusive. She broke it off with him and ran back to me for support. I had been desperate for her love back then, and we reconciled and got back together. I went to therapy to specifically work on the trust issues I had built up around her, and it was an intentional effort that I struggled with every day. I vowed never to treat her poorly and to be a forgiving person. I worked hard on my mental health to become a self-sufficient and stable person, so she wouldn't have to see me break down anymore. I cultivated a group of friends that supported me and our relationship, though she didn't hang out with them often. After we graduated I struggled to find a job in my field, while she excelled in her career. Our town had a minuscule industry for me, but was practically built around hers. I brought up the potential of moving to my hometown, where I could easily land a job in my industry, and while hers wasn't as big as in our current town, there were still a lot of opportunities. Plus we would be closer to my family, whom I rarely saw, and many of my supportive friends. She refused, as we wouldn't be able to visit her family as often, at least once a month, because we would be moving across the country. I prioritized our relationship and we stayed where we were. Eventually I did find a job working from home, but I was getting paid very little, and she became the breadwinner. I used the money I made to buy her gifts and flowers when I could, while juggling my student loan debt. We split the rent, but she paid all the other bills. She would buy groceries and I would cook our meals. If I had no work I would clean the house while she worked. Our motto was that we were a team. During those 3 years we lived in bliss. She never asked to open the relationship and would stay in with me after work for quality time together. If I chatted with my friends online she would join us. We had spontaneous road trips and dates and spent every minute together then. One of our friends, M25, started going through a divorce and needed a place to stay. We had an extra bedroom, so he crashed there. He is a very social and talkative person, so our quality time was suddenly barraged by an extra person. He was home constantly and needed a lot of support, which we tried to give him. Off the bat I noticed he and my ex got along very well, and he would tell her things and seek out her support over mine. Because of my work on my trust issues, I was proud of myself for not seeing anything wrong with this. They would go on walks together, and she would come home and update me on how it went. I started hanging out with my friends more while they talked, but I made it known to her that I missed having our quality one-on-one time. We made a few attempts at spending alone time together, but somehow he would always show up and become involved again. She would try to get out of the house to hang out with her best friend, his wife F25, so that he could get used to being alone. After I got vaccinated, I scheduled a trip to visit my parents for the first time in 2 years. Before I left, I reminded her that he was needy and vulnerable, and to continue to maintain some space between them. She agreed and reassured me they were just friends, and that nothing would happen. I had a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, but ignored it at the time. My trip was amazing. My parents were so happy to see me, and even more loving than before. All my online friends that lived in my hometown came out, and we had big events celebrating my return. I was surrounded by family and friends every day, and they all made it well known how happy they were to be hanging out with me. Meanwhile, I would text my ex good morning and good night at the very least, and update her on how my days were going. She would constantly say, "I understand that you're busy. Thanks for checking on me. I'm glad you're having fun with friends." But being surrounded by family and friends in a town that I loved was growing more painful as my return flight approached. I spoke to my best friend NB26 about maybe moving back home and the logistics of it. They were very supportive, but understood my hesitance, as my ex made it clear that she didn't want to move. As I spoke to a couple more friends and my parents about it, it seemed like the right choice for my future would be to make the move, with or without my ex. When I returned, our friend had moved out very suddenly. I sat my ex down and told her that I wanted to move back home. She cried a lot and told me she didn't want to move, and she felt forced to make a decision. Broken-hearted, I told her it may be best for us to break up, since we don't do long distance well. We agreed to stay together for now and break up later. Sometime before I moved, she told me that our friend was reconciling with his wife and that they were getting back together, but said this sourly. I felt out of the loop, but trusted that there was more to the story that may not be my business to know, and we continued our terminal relationship. I introduced her to a relatively new friend I had made online that lived in our town. He M24 was friendly, but a little weird and awkward. We played games together and talked a lot online. They spoke normally to each other, but I didn't notice them hitting it off or anything. We all exchanged numbers and hung out a little more before my move. She started asking me for more space as the breakup became more real, and I would talk to my friends while she would talk to hers. I found out later that she was talking to M24 for hours into the night, and she told me she needed someone to talk to about our relationship ending, as her best friend, the wife, and the husband were being very distant. 1 week before my flight, she told me that we needed to break up immediately, and that she couldn't wait anymore. I cried a lot, but accepted this as I saw myself at fault for this anyways. She left after that talk and didn't return until late that night. We slept in separate rooms. The next couple days were the same. I snapped one day and told her how upset and frustrated I was with the entire situation. Even though it was my fault, I was still allowed to be sad about it. She regarded me very coldly and barely spoke, with a neutral look on her face, while I sat on the floor sobbing. I asked her directly what her relationship with M24 was, since he'd been avoiding me. She told me they'd been sleeping together since the day we broke up. Right after our talk, she said that she thinks she's polyamorous and that she isn't satisfied with one partner. I told her that this is no way to explore your sexuality, and that I wish she had been honest with me. Defeated, I went to my room and called my best friend for hours, sobbing. After that, my ex and I attempted to find some friendship between us, just for now, and she became a little bit warmer as my flight approached. 2 days before my flight, I met up with the husband and his wife for luncheon to say my goodbyes. I told them that my ex and I had broken up officially, and that I was focusing on the future. They were both very happy for my move and excited that I would be surrounded by a loving family and friends, but they seemed antsy. The wife finally dropped the bomb on me, while her husband looked sheepish. He and my ex were sleeping together the entire time I was out of town visiting my family. Before we broke up, and before I even considered moving, my ex had been telling him a story about me being an absent and uncaring partner the entire time, and that she wanted to explore polyamory. His wife found out and dropped all their current issues to force him back into the house because she didn't want me to get hurt any further. I was shocked, but had already felt defeated from the news of him 24. I said my goodbyes and she apologized to me for the pain I was going through. Her husband quietly apologized as well, probably knowing how deeply in the wrong he was. They have both cut off all ties with my ex now. Before returning to the house I called my ex, who answered normally and happily, and told her his wife told me everything. Would you mind being out of the house while I finish packing tomorrow? She was quiet, then started crying, and began saying I was going to tell you. Before I said I don't want to talk about it, I finished packing my bags with another friend that I told everything to. The day before my flight when my ex returned to the house to pick something up, I confronted her. I didn't say anything angry, or mean, or hurt. I just told her how excited I was for my flight, and that this was goodbye. She sobbed as I tried to keep my face straight, and spewed all kinds of excuses. I didn't respond to any of them, and repeated that I'm only here to say goodbye. She said that she's not a bad person, and that she understood that I may never forgive her, and I stayed quiet. I kept my mind looking forward to my flight and my future. Finally I walked away, and that was the last time I saw her. My packing friend drove me to the airport in the morning and tearfully saw me off, apologizing for how the last few weeks had gone, and that she was excited for my friends and family to see me again. It's been 2 months since then. Being home every day has felt full of love. My parents are supportive while I figure my life out, and my friends make an effort to let me know how much they love me. I'm invited out to events constantly, and they talk to me every day to check in on me. I've been going outside and driving myself for the first time in a long time. I feel very full of life compared to how I felt in my ex's town. There are even a couple of women interested in me, but I've made it clear that I'm not ready to date yet. I found out that my online group has kicked out both my ex and M24, and one of them told him off about hurting me. Everyone including myself has both of them blocked. I found out recently through the wife's social media that my ex has started officially dating M24. The wife is disgusted by all of it, and they're definitely not best friends anymore. A few of my friends have told me he has a history of being kind of predatory and gross to women, and have always made them feel uncomfortable around him. Sometimes I still worry about my ex, but I have to keep reminding myself that she's not my problem anymore. I'm sad however at her attempts to explore her sexuality the way that she did. I have a lot of bisexual and polyamorous friends that tell me she went about it all in the worst and most harmful way possible. I don't hold anything against bi and poly people, and I'm sad that my ex has given them such a bad name. My friends have beautiful relationships and are wonderful, honest people. I'm meditating and exercising and socializing every day, and I've surprised myself with how easily I can make new friends. A lot of issues I assumed were inherent in me seem to have dissipated after leaving my ex. I'm not needy or insecure or clingy. I understand my boundaries and attachments and what I want in a partner. Of course every day is still a struggle, but I'm proud of myself for how far I've come. TLDR, my partner of 7 years regularly bent the rules around what constituted as cheating until she finally concretely cheated on me with a friend we were housing. Her excuses included exploring her sexuality and that I was somehow an absent partner, even though I've always been romantic and put a lot of effort into our relationship. We broke up, and I finally moved back to my hometown, where I'm surrounded by love and support.